unfortunately, his mom's in hospice care at the moment, but he's able to join in here via Zoom. And so I got this up on the screen, and this is what I have in large print form, and I think Josh printed some 11 by 17s as well.
Yeah, a bunch of them here. Like one.
I don't know if we, Josh, do we have her one?
Yeah, honestly, I'm
Jay
not.
coming?
No.
Okay. So, probably from,
Andy coming?
no.
You probably use the other.
I think it's about it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if, unless somebody knows somebody else that was gonna come.
Introduce everybody.
Right, yeah, no, that's perfect. I'll let you do the introductions. You know everyone, Carl.
We'll get started. Is there any public comment before our meeting? Hearing none. With us is Michael Freese, Russ Lawson, Derek Weston with the Sheriff's Department, Michael Martin, City Administrator, Terry Rogers, Chief of Police, Augie Griffin, County Clerk, Josh Knight, out here at the County Highway, Sheriff Jeff Wood. I'm sure I don't know you.
That's okay. Michaela Vincent. I'm with Core Construction. We work very closely with Klinger.
Okay. And you're Wendy?
Bethany.
Bethany Lawson with Coles County
And I'm Kayla, working with Klinger.
with Klinger. And Carl Farnham, County Board. So go ahead, Michael.
Okay. Well, that's good. I'm gonna get this back and flip it. Let's be like the eye doctors. Start looking better on one or two.
See that right? Around me?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Pretty.
Yeah.
Okay, and then also on the Zoom call is Sean Harding. He's my partner architect from HMN Architects. And I met most of the county people before, for the people from the city. It's very nice to meet you. And Klinger is architecture engineering firm. HMN are architects who specialize in doing jail projects and also healthcare projects. So Sean designs about 2 county jails a year. So he's got a lot of expertise and going back many years in doing this as well. And so our 2 firms, we do partner on projects together. And so what we're gonna do is kind of give an update of where we're at so far on the design for the jail site. And then some of the questions that I might be asking Sean, because that's his area of expertise. So just to give a little bit of background information on the project, most people from the county are familiar. The city, you know, you're coming a little bit newer to the process here. We've been trying to find a site selection for the new county jail, and the opportunity for the Vance School building has come up. And in general, both Sean and I feel that could actually be a very good, viable property for this, because as I'm going to show here on the screen, if I go to my next if you're familiar where Vance School is, the building right here in yellow, that's the Vance School building. So you have that large open field to the west because you're in between the northbound highway and the southbound highway. And so we've kind of taken the jail size that we were looking at for both the jail and the sheriff's department. Could that even fit on the site? And we were able to determine that yes, it could fit on the site, still leave room for parking. Now, some people ask me why we didn't go further north, because to the north is where that Coca-Cola bottling plant is. If you're familiar with that property, as you go north, it drops down quite a bit. It's about a 4-foot difference from where the Vance School is to where the Coca-Cola driveway is. So it drops off there. So we can't get too close there because the ground starts doing this. We could if we wanted to do a retaining wall or something like that, but we're deciding let's maybe not have to do some extra engineering we would not have to do. So, and when the USDA portion of it, they love to fund or help fund projects that benefit multiple agencies. And so when the opportunity for the city of Paris with the police department came up to come be part of this process, we're like, well, that seems to be a great fit because that brings in another agency. In this case, it'd be a similar agency to the sheriff's department. Now, all fairness to the police department, when we were asking, can we get something to fit with the police department, we never had the opportunity to come talk to you guys in person about what your needs are, to come up with essentially what is the blue box and the plan. So, because we had to kind of keep moving the process along, the pink is what's represented by the jail, the secure section. The green is the sheriff's department, and blue is the police department. So Sean, who's done several police stations, he took a similar police station he did for a city of about this size, and kind of used some general rule of thumbs just to try and block out some square footage of what would be appropriate for a police department, knowing that eventually we would actually have the meeting like this, where we could sit down and then start to ask, and maybe even have a more direct follow-up meeting to get exactly what your needs are. For the purpose of this exercise, about a month ago, was for us to try and figure out how much square footage, and then what does that come out to cost-wise. And so that's kind of how we got to this process. And this is great as the next step here, to have both sheriff department here and the city police departments. We can start to look at this a little bit more. And we're not gonna solve everything today, you know, where all the rooms need to be, or maybe we need to adjust some sizes, but it's good to start to have some of those conversations. Now, the question that's come up with is what'll happen with Vance? Vance, in my opinion, is still in very good shape, like anything that could be 115 years old, and even us in our age. We get a few building or body aches every now and then. Vance has got a few of those, but in general, it's in very good serviceable condition. So with a few repairs, probably mostly related to water infiltration, I believe that building can be serviceable for much longer. Your courthouse in town is a great example, 1891, and it's still in very good serviceable condition. So what we're potentially going to be able to do is we could locate some functions that could be part of the jail. Well, it could be, you know, does ESDA go to there, does 911 and the server farm go there, or do they come to the new building build? Over at the courthouse we're looking at right now, we have, and Augie knows this quite well, we're kind of really cramped for space at the courthouse. In fact, right now the county has the assessor and the treasurer and the IT department across the street in the, what's currently the county annex building. And so is there ways we could use Vance to help alleviate some overcrowding at the courthouse, maybe bring some more county functions together? And so the one thought is, can we potentially, with some county departments, if they're court related, they should definitely stay in the courthouse. If they're non-court related, would we have room here at Vance, because the total square footage, each floor of Vance is about 6,000 square feet. So that brings you to about a total of 18,000 square feet. And when you compare that to the size of the courthouse, the size of a courthouse floor, you know, it's a lot of ins and outs on the courthouse. You're just a little bit larger on the courthouse floor, but you also have to remember you got those four wide hallways, that big rotunda area. So by the time you look at the office sizes there, I feel very confident we could be able to relocate offices over to Vance and be able to help situations in both buildings. Okay, so that's just kind of the general layout. A month ago when I was here last, and Core Construction, Michaela over here, Core Construction's helping us with the courthouse project, so which we were doing earlier today, and she was sitting in on the progress meeting for this. You might be familiar with Core because they did the Tiger Apartments at the high school. They were the construction management firm that did that. When we were here a month ago, we had designed a connection between the new building and into Vance that would have been, say, like a county board meeting room and a public meeting space. And the overall size of the building, when we budgeted it at the time, including the renovation for Vance, came in, I believe it was right about $22 million. And that would have been all in for everything. That would have been site costs, that would have been architecture engineering fee, renovating Vance, building the new, so that would kind of be your all-in number. And as the county gave us the feedback, that's a little bit higher than what they wanted to be able to afford. So we started trying to think in preparation of this meeting, what can we do to start to reduce some costs? So one thing, an idea that I came up with is, well, maybe, because I think we're still gonna have plenty of space in Vance, the question was asked, instead of building all new square footage between the sheriff department and Vance, can we put some of that into the basement of Vance? And so that's where I did this study here. And I'm gonna zoom in, and Sean, I'll get yours up on the screen here in a few minutes. I was able to, and you might be able to see this better on the drawings in front of you, but what was gonna be connecting the two spaces was a larger county meeting room. If any of you went to school at Vance, you might be familiar with where the lunchroom was on the bottom floor. We felt that could be an ideal meeting room. We already had existing bathrooms there that we can clean up and repurpose. And we felt at the time we did have enough space to be able to relocate dispatch down there if we wanted to. The one problem with Vance is that there is no elevator. And so our thought was, instead of trying to take up square footage within Vance to install an elevator, we could very easily on a square building like that, add an elevator on the outside. And so on the south side of Vance, that's where that external fire escape is that we would have to get rid of anyway. We thought, well, we were originally thinking of putting the elevator and an extra stair here in between the two buildings. And we decided, if we were trying to do less square footage there, we could do a small addition here. And this is what you're seeing with where the elevator would be located and another stair. And we can make use of what's already two existing exterior doors right on the south side. Because if you're familiar with that fire escape, you come out a door. Well, then I'd only have to make a opening in a, is it 18-inch wide exterior wall? Those are some big brick walls. And so I can reuse them. Yeah, and on the south side of the building, there's also already, and Russ knows this, there's already that basement stair there. I can reuse a lot of some of the existing construction and improve upon it to get kind of like a front lobby area, which is what you don't really have when you come into Vance. Because when you come inside, you kind of come in on the two stairs and you're like literally inside the building. So with the option that I had, this would kind of give us more of a secure entry point. What Sean is suggesting that we can still do is we could still have this, but maybe it kind of has some type of connection to the sheriff's department, to the jail, and maybe that's a little more balance between the two, so that way you can still get to one building to the other without necessarily having to go outside. So we can explore that option further. I just kind of wanted to be able to explain that to you. Where we laid it out between the two buildings presently, they're about 30 feet apart. So if we wanted to leave that open, that's quite a bit of space for two cars to be able to drive, to give you some circulation. If you wanted to have parking along the side of the building, you could have a row of parallel parking or even some diagonal parking with some bypass. So that's a possibility, but I also see Sean's point about trying to have the two have some type of connection as well.
That's a good idea.
I think just some private parking in the back that's secure,
Yeah,
for judges or whoever.
right, because I'm gonna go click back here to the, wrong click. I don't know what I clicked on there. Okay. Going back here into where the, between the two buildings, if we had a little bit of that connection here, the judge could come from the backside, pull in, and be able to park there, and not park in the front parking lot where everyone else is. So it's nice to be able to do that. We feel that we would have parking in along, does this thing got a laser pointer on it, Josh? I thought I had my laser pointer with me, but I don't think I grabbed it. Employee parking for the sheriff department would be in the back. The county employees for the government center, their parking would be in back. And I believe there's a way too, we can still have parking for police department employees in the back, so that way they're not parking up here in the front. So Sean, was there anything you wanted to add to what I explained there? And then I think we got some questions.
I think the point with this being a county or a regional county complex is I kind of want to make sure that we look at this as a single point of entry for public. I don't like having a lot of extra doors for people to access the building. I would like one location for security to be able to bring people in and out of the building. And I think that's why I think the connection between the two buildings is important. I think that's where that can occur. And I also think it gives us an opportunity to maybe bridge a little bit of the architectural style between the two buildings. We can add some material that kind of makes the older building blend in a little bit, or maybe the new building blend in a little bit more with the style of the older brick building.
So, I got that image right here.
On that Sally Port on the north side,
Yes, Jerry.
from the outside of it to where that chain link fence, which I'm assuming that chain link fence is the property line.
Yeah,
So how much space is right there?
that is, I believe it's closer to 40 feet.
Okay,
And so we have a setback that has to occur in the back there. See if I can drop Sean's image on here. There we go.
Do we know what that side yard setback is, Michael?
I don't at the moment, I think Colvin does, but I think right now we're close to about where that 40-foot backyard setback. We wanted to make sure we left enough space too, that you could be able to drive vehicles
so there could be a
back there.
circle drive or something where you could come out of Sally Port and pull back around into it?
Yes,
or-
that was the intent, is that you would come out and be able to pull around and come through. So that will, we'll be working on that
I
with
know
the
like
site plan design.
Hyatt County, they're similar to that. That's where they're, I remember right, their generator, and they've got like a chain link area with kind of a storage, they throw a bicycle or something like that out back
Mhm.
to lock it up.
Yeah, so we would have an entry point here off of the highway where you would come drive through and you could come into the Sally Port. And then, you know, here's where parking would be, that you would be able to turn, come right back out. This is Highway 1 here, the northbound. We already got that retaining wall here, so you already got that grade change happening. As we felt trying to put a driveway here, we wouldn't really achieve much.
So it's not gonna be a Main
Yeah.
Street to Central
We
Street
won't be able
driveway.
to go street to street.
Okay,
The other advantage to that, and Josh can attest to this, trying to work with IDOT on getting a driveway permit, it's possible, but you know, it takes some time, and only doing that in case one driveway will, I think, be better. We could definitely do that, but the grade change that comes off of here, you're coming into about that 2 or 3 feet change. And so in order to be able to pull up there effectively, we'd be losing some of that area, and it's already sloping. It slopes to the east and slopes to the north, because we're kind of the high ground right here, and it slopes north and east, so it's a little complicated trying to work that through. I'm gonna go show what Sean's option was here. Any questions so far? These are good questions I'm hearing. So what Sean was showing is we had, and this is kind of an overlay of the previous image we had. And I don't know if you can see this on the Zoom or not, Sean. I don't know if I can project and show the Zoom image at the same time. But we had the connection between the two buildings. This is what we showed a month ago. And we've worked this part out of the project here in beige, because essentially we've relocated most all of this into Vance. What Sean was saying, and trying to keep the connection between the two buildings, and then try and provide like a unified front. Because if someone's pulling up to this building and they're a citizen, whether they need to go see someone in the jail, go see someone at the police department, or they need to come pay their county tax assessment or something, how do they know where to go? And so Sean's point was having some kind of central control point, something that would connect what looks like the Vance School and the jail. Now, we're gonna try and make the jail blend into Vance, so we don't have an apple and an orange sitting next to each other. We want the two to look like this was done with some thought, but to have something that would kind of look like this is where you should come in as your entrance. So we're looking at, but instead of having all this area where Sean's put it in red, let's maybe at least keep that. We can get rid of the bathrooms, because we got bathrooms down here. He did have video, a video appearance room, that way you could do, or video visitation, excuse me, Sean.
Get
So-
video visit, yeah.
They could do visitation to inmates in the jail, but maybe we decide this isn't the right location for that, maybe that goes into Vance, maybe that goes somewhere else, or is that something what the county would like to have too? It's,
And that was the conversation that we had the other day in talking to Jay. He said, people don't come to visit anymore.
okay,
I mean, probably
It's-
2 visitation cubes somewhere, probably, and I'm gonna say more into the jail itself, but like anymore, everything is done, you know, every cell block's got a kiosk that they can get on and do their video visitation.
right,
So everybody, except for maybe an occasional grandma somewhere that don't have a smartphone or computer, and they just call up and make an arrangement, so, I mean, something like that, still somebody could just drop in, but there's only, you know, probably two booths would be plenty,
okay. So we can,
at the very most.
that's a
I'm sure we
place
need
where we
to.
can start to squeeze down some square footage for that.
And I know the other day, we had a meeting with the sheriff's department and the county board, and there was some concern, because at that time, you were planning on putting 911 in the Vance building. And we had some concerns about it being in a separate building versus not being in the new complex. And, you know, we still have that concern. You know, we've talked with the 911 coordinator, she gave her input, you know, we talked to the sheriff. But if in the end it ends up in the Vance building, we definitely need a connection. Because from time to time, either someone from the department has to go to dispatch or
Right.
dispatch, you know, there has to be a, and we don't want them going through the outside.
Sure.
So that, having that connection is good. Another thing that when we discussed the other day, we feel like we need a storage building outside.
Okay,
The possibility of 1 or 2 vehicle storage building, plus just something to store, you know, if you have to process a vehicle, you know, you gotta have a place to do it. You know, if you have stuff that can't go into the evidence in the jail due to, you know, whatever, we need to have something
Yeah, I mean,
on site.
if we recover a motorcycle or something, then we need to put it
yeah,
somewhere.
Snowmobile, ATV, any of that kind
Right.
of stuff.
Right.
I agree, we've done a lot of those kind of separate, large evidence, storage, facilities.
would
And
it
it's
be,
probably cheaper, and I would suggest that we just, speak to somebody that does pre-engineered stuff. You don't need to probably pay the architect's fees for a storage building,
Mhm.
but it should be master planned into what we're doing, so
Right.
it makes sense with the
Just
plan.
figure a space in to put it and then let it.
yeah.
Right.
So my first thought is on that, because we're already tight on the site, can we look at maybe picking up the residential? That would be.
We talked about
perfect.
that,
Okay,
getting that just for, you know, whether it be put a building or more parking, you know,
Mhm.
just, I think that's gonna be a good idea to acquire that.
okay,
Cause I don't know what the city's plans, if they're a part of this, I don't know whether you're gonna have storage, you know, down at the old police department. You know, if that's, you know, if that's not gonna be an option, then we gotta consider, you know, they're gonna need storage, you know, to put things. So it might take up more, need something bigger than what we originally thought, you know.
Put a more impound lot there?
Well, no, I don't think that's a good idea, because look at how many cars you got out here. You know, your impound lot up the street here, there's no way there's gonna be enough room for all that, I don't think. Do you, Sheriff?
No, this would be more just of a building to have where we recover a stolen vehicle, we can pull it in there waiting for the state or forensics or somebody to come down and, but it's a secured place that nobody can contaminate it or,
Right. But I think you'll still need to have
We
your
usually
impound.
use their, towing agency, they'll store it inside. Typically,
They have enough room for on a
Usually
few
it's
day basis?
processed or something, yeah.
Okay, well, that might be another option,
Okay.
but I still think we need to look at
Yeah.
maybe a storage building of some
Right.
size there.
Because even if the police department doesn't need one, if the sheriff's department needs one, we can plan for that. And we can also do some thoughtful planning that if we do it by acquiring this property and we put a building up for the sheriff's department, maybe we try and leave some extra space if you want to add a future building. So that way, if it's the police department or if ESDA needs to be able to park their trailer, because if ESDA is coming over, they're gonna want to have their trailer parked somewhere
Right.
out of the elements, so that could be, we could easily think about that with that piece of property.
Yeah, okay.
While I'm thinking about properties, is, the environmental, phase one environmental assessment is just about complete. And so what we found is up here at the Coca-Cola bottling plant, they used to have 1,000-gallon underground storage tank for fuel right there in the front. As I found monitoring wells and I was out walking around. We've completed the review of that. And based upon what we've seen, that's mostly, the tank's been removed and the majority of that's been cleaned up. Now, there is still some residual contaminants there. But what our environmental engineer feels is because we're a higher property and with the soil, we don't think this is a contamination risk to your property. But it's something you gotta be mindful of when we're planning.
One other thing too, Michael, what about a antenna tower or anything for us, city, whoever, all we have out there, where would it go out there? Where would we go off of?
We could do an antenna, we could probably, like the mast you have right now, the tower, potentially maybe somewhere in the back here by the school is where that could be located. We could, I didn't know if that was gonna be coming over or not. Well, it hadn't come up in discussion in a while, but I'm glad that you
So I
mentioned
kind
it.
of, and I got to thinking about it the other day because,
I think it's gonna have.
I
to
mean,
be
if the old jail goes away,
Okay,
everything there will probably disappear.
right.
But
Okay,
with that being said, and I don't know how the cables and stuff run, there's that big tower on the backside of the fairgrounds behind the, I don't know if we could, you can run cables that far
The
and,
cell tower,
yeah, they'll probably have it by the beach barn.
right.
I mean, I don't know if that'd be an option, you know, it might be cheaper to run cables and hook into that and rent it than it would be to construct a tower and,
yeah, cause I don't know if you could necessarily like relocate your existing tower. I mean, in theory, I guess it could be dismantled, but I think by the time you do the cost of dismantling it and bringing it.
I think we're gonna have to purchase a new one, unless it's an option to use that tower, what, a block away, block and a half, 2 blocks?
yeah, block.
Okay,
But it's not that
Couple
far,
blocks.
I mean, if you could just go right to it, it wouldn't be that far, but,
That's something we need to talk with, them people at
and of
Danville.
course, you know, later on down the line, we'll have to notify like AT&T that we rent space to and all that too, whether they wanna stick around or, and
so,
maybe with the radios anymore, we don't need, I don't know what that, I forget what that tower is, 180? We may not need something quite that big.
yeah, yes, John?
One of the things,
200
one of
maybe
the
is
things
the
that
max height.
Yeah,
I
that's
did
fine.
not show in any of the plans that I was involved with, is we did allow for some future growth, that would be to the south of the housing that we're already showing. We've got a secure corridor that would lead to that area. So we need to also kind of be conscious of anything we put out there. You know, I guess we don't want to put something out there that we'll need to move later if they
Oh,
ever add it
if
to
it were
the
to go on.
housing.
Yeah, so where Sean's talking about, here's secure housing, here's the police department. Right here, there's an area that if we needed to have, let's say at some point in time you decide you need to put an addition onto the building, here's the corridor that would serve to be the next connection to another piece. Whether if you needed more secure housing, or you needed to add, expand your non-secured footprint, whether it be police department, sheriff department, or
So
something
looking at the
else.
tower, you'd probably maybe go up in that top corner or even where
I
that
would
little
think
house,
kind of over here, because the tower could even be put in a place where it's less ideal for parking.
or back in. we
Or
acquired
if you're able
some
to acquire
area,
this property here,
back up in,
you could go, 'cause I think
There
the
somewhere,
property
yeah.
line's right about there. So, yeah, the tower could go somewhere, and actually having the tower there is not, if you're able to put it on that property, that would you think about the sequence of construction, when they started doing all the construction to this, I don't know when your plans would be, and that's one of the things we talked about in design. If we're gonna be putting a new tower up, when do we cut over, bring that in, does that happen before the building, and so forth, so that'll be something to think about. The other environmental site we found wasn't just the Coca-Cola bottling plant. On the southeast corner here, it's not shown up here, I believe there used to be an old gas
There was a gas
station
station
right
one
there.
time.
There's still 3 underground storage tanks there, and according to the EPA records, they have not been removed. And it sounds like they've been there for a long time. So,
It's been a market
again, I
place
asked the
for-
question to my environmental engineer, okay, so we know that's there, is that a risk factor to our property? And in her opinion, it would be a low risk, but it's still there. And so if you're gonna do, if any of you ever bought property before, and you do that, that's always one of those questions come up, are you aware of any environmental things on adjacent properties? So normally, what we would do is we would recommend doing some additional testing, which would be groundwater sampling and soil vapor testing, just to be able to confirm where this is at and make sure it's not a risk factor for you. In our opinion, we don't think it's a high risk to you, but, you know, due diligence says we would do a little bit extra testing, so that would involve bringing out a small boring machine, because we'd want to do some soil borings, because they would go down, put the probe in, and, you know, find where groundwater is. We did find on the geotechnical report, you do have a little bit higher groundwater level up here. So when they were digging, once they did their bore, groundwater was filling in. The soil quality isn't bad, it's a little bit softer on soil. So what that means is we have to put in a little bit thicker of a foundation footing underneath, so that way the building doesn't sink. I'm assuming they must have known that when they did Vance, because when I walk across Vance, I don't see much for settlement anywhere in that building at all. So that's just the condition of what this is. And at the same time too, this also used to be, now I think about it, this was a cemetery once upon a time. So it could very well be when they came and exhumed all the bodies and relocated them, who knows what they brought in for fill and brought into that. And since this is kind of raised up anyway, oh yeah, it makes more sense. Since this is kind of raised up when they brought the school in, I mean, who knows, they might have actually raised up that whole site to try and make it higher, so we got some softer soil there. But we feel pretty confident that we can accommodate that with a little bit more robust of a footing, but not necessarily have to get into like geotechnical piers or some really substantial underground footings that would get into a higher cost area. So I'll be able to send out copies of the geotechnical report, and Bethany, you'll get copies of these for Coles County Economic Development. The environmental assessment, the only thing that needs to be done on the environmental assessment is they have to do one follow-up conversation with the fire chief, because for underground storage tanks, local fire marshal is involved in that inspection, so she'll get the last of that information, and we'll be able to have that report back to you. So that's still kind of looking at the overall, kind of the 30,000 foot level is, and I think what we'll probably do next is we'll probably maybe turn this off on the screen and kind of talk through about the drawing a little bit and get some feedback on the space planning. And, because I'm sure the police department would like to be able to share what their thoughts are. Any questions before we get into that portion of this meeting? Sean, anything you want to add so far?
No, I think we're good so far.
Okay. So let's go ahead and let's turn the light back on, Josh. And so we're going to kind of talk our way through, and we got 11 by 17s. Mr. Martin, do you need a copy? We got some extra ones here. So with this idea of being a shared facility for both the sheriff department and the police department, turn it this way, my microphone will pick, that way Sean can hear me talking. Can you still hear me okay, Sean?
I can.
Okay.
You can hear that.
we wanted to make sure that there was still considered a police department entry and then a sheriff's department entry. And so right now, in the blue box area, if you look to where the yellow
Why
is chief.
did we decide that? I mean,
That
is
way,
that just
if
something
someone-
you guys and Terry want, or is that?
You know, it's just something that kind of been brought up in discussion in the past, so they just kind of throw something together and.
I mean, I
It
don't
was-
know, I'm just asking.
Yeah,
Oh, no, it was a thought
I'm not
we had.
involved in the police department,
Right.
so I mean,
We were thinking about that as well, so that way if someone needed to come and their business is more police department related, it's easy to find where to come to. And then if it's sheriff department related, there's a door for that. Now, does that mean, can we arrange it differently so there's a shared, where you come into a vestibule and you go like left to police, right to sheriff? We could potentially look at doing something like that, but one of the reasons Sean laid it out this way is because of some of the way, you know, law enforcement works. So for example, when someone gets arrested in town, most of the time they're arrested by the police department. And so coming off of the corridor here from where the police department entry is, this is where we would have your bond, you'd be meeting with your attorney and then maybe the bondsman. And so this would be kind of that very initial, the correct term would be, they're not getting booked yet at that point, correct, Sean?
No,
Sure.
if they're being brought in to be booked into jail, they'll go to the Sally Port.
Yeah,
And
Someone's
they
gonna-
will, there's an arresting officer area back there. At that point in time, they get turned over to Jay's team, and we separate the arresting officer from the jail staff. I've never worked with a department that, didn't want to have some separation at that point from the arresting officer to the jail staff. So then if there needs to be an interview process or anything like that, there is an interview room in the jail area that they can do an interview process with the person. If not, there's a interview or what I would call a soft interview in the police department. And we, you know, again, I'm taking a shot in the dark on this. If that needs to be a harder cell, wet cell, whatever, and they want to use it for holding, that's fine. But for the most part, what I see is that that's typically an interview area, and then they get processed. And at that point in time, they can either be walked in, and right now, I took out as many doors out of that secure corridor for the bail bondsman and the attorney as I could. There's dollar savings with every door I save on that. But if there needs to be a pass-through door, and they can get walked into the jail and a booking process from, say, an interview, you find out this person was involved in a crime, and you want to go ahead and book them, we can get you into the jail that way. But for the most part, most people are going to enter that jail through the Sally Port and the booking jail, or booking desk in the north side of the facility.
From time to time, the detectives, you know, they working on a case, they'll bring people in just to interview them, and then based on the interview, then they, you know, can make an arrest, and then they'll, at that point, you're just walk them from there to the jail.
When people come to the police department, what is this? Is this Blackburn
There'll be
here?
Blackburn there.
So when they come, this parking lot right here,
Mhm.
where they gonna come through the door of the police department, where they coming through the sheriff's
They'll
department?
come here, into this vestibule,
For,
then into the police department.
okay,
They come in over here, the vestibule for the sheriff's office. So you have a police sign over here and a sheriff's sign over here.
got it.
At this point in time, right now, the only department from the municipality is the police department. So I actually did separate it out and we discussed the building as being the regional county building. So I took the municipality entrance out of that function.
And we do have a connection between the two. There's a
Sure.
vestibule here between police and sheriff. So that way, if you guys need to go talk to each other, you don't have to go outside the building, walk around. You can come through that way here. And there is a way for, if, it would be controlled by the jail staff, but if someone from the police department needed to come into secure area, you know, we do have a man porch here, so they would be able to come through and get into
And that could be
the,
Michael, that could be as secure as they want it to be. I just didn't know, so I got a double door between it if they wanted to have some separation between the police department and the sheriff's department, but that could, as far as I'm concerned, if they want that to be a hallway, that can be a hallway.
And so for the staff support areas within the police department and both the sheriff department, we have a locker room for both men and women. So that way there's a place for them to change. In the police department, we have a squad room area and then a sheriff deputy area. It was a little bit larger for the sheriff deputy space when we had the connection here. And as I was trying to spread these two apart, we'll kind of regain that space back as we look at trying to get that connection between the two buildings, which it sounds like everyone's still on board, they want to be able to do. So we'll get that back to them. And we can definitely do, if it's easier for you, Chief, to do a follow-up conversation where Sean and I would meet with you and kind of go through our list of regular questions about what your space needs are, what you're staffing now, what you're staffing in the future, so we can make sure, is this blue box the right size, is it the right shape?
Yeah, what is the square footage on that now?
It was on the old one, wasn't it?
It was on the old one.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
It was on a separate piece of paper. Carl, you got that?
Yeah, I got it here somewhere.
oh, it was on there, that's right.
Yeah.
So, police department was 2,700 square feet, almost 2,800 square feet. And again, if we need to flex this to accommodate some more space for that, I know it's more than what you got now.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is your building now, Terry, 30 by 90?
Good question. Not set up the best. But
And we wanted to make sure too that there's separate evidence storage. So you see there's room for police department evidence storage, and then here in the sheriff's department area, you'll have your evidence storage. And the one thing we know is that you never can get away with evidence. So at some point in time, there might be the need for additional evidence storage, and I'm not sure, well, we've been through your storage area, so I think we can accommodate that right now. We don't know what size evidence area you have presently for the police department.
within the police building. So we
Okay.
have permanent storage, and we have temporary evidence,
Okay,
so it goes from point
So
A to
say,
point
there's
B.
some cases they have to keep that evidence forever,
Yeah,
and there's some of that stuff that they can get rid of after, I think, 7 years.
just.
Maybe it's 12 years actually, but
just depends what it is.
the idea of some offsite storage is probably a legitimate question that was asked earlier.
police department has off-site storage right now? Okay,
And we actually have known as custodians starting Monday.
oh, good. Makes that a lot easier. Now, I know one discussion item, and I know Andy's not here today, was on the kitchen area that we sized in, because we showed in the kitchen and then support space where it'll be a cooler, freezer, and dry goods storage. So Sean, you wanna kinda, I know the county's first reaction was, is that larger than what we need if we're gonna do more of a, I think catering kitchen was the
Right.
concept of, that's what you guys are kinda doing right now, is meals are made off-site
Off-site brought in
and brought in, and I think that sounds like that's the way you guys would prefer to continue to do. So I wanted to have Sean have a chance to kind of explain through that a little bit, and then we can talk about, what do we need to do to maybe tweak that to meet more of your vision. So Sean, if you wanna talk that
Yeah.
part.
So, pardon me. I actually sized that as a cooking kitchen for the bed count that we've got now and approximately double that bed count. So if we're gonna just do a warming kitchen, I call it a warming kitchen, you guys call it a catering kitchen, just a little bit different terminology. We can actually save some square footage in that kitchen area. At that point in time, it's just, in correct me if I'm wrong, they're actually coming to you already heated up, or if it's a cold meal, it's already cold meal, and then you just deliver it to the cells? Jeff, rather?
Yeah,
Yes,
Okay, so that was square footage that I wasn't 100% sure you're gonna stay with that or not, so there's some square footage there that we can repurpose, because I can cut that down probably by half at least. You're still gonna need some, I'm guessing that they're gonna require, state of Illinois is gonna require still a triple sink, because it doesn't matter if you're washing a fork or whatever in that facility, even if you don't have a dishwashing unit, I'm gonna have a grease trap and a triple sink. And we obviously need a place for storage, and then however you handle, process, package, and deliver the food, cart
Well,
storage, stuff like that.
yeah,
We'll have
the
that.
cooler and the freezer area, I think we wanna keep. Cause that's one of our problems now, sometimes is the actual storage of the stuff to.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. So that's part of that, I think we went through and did a pretty good job with you on the programming side of things. We probably need to sit down and go back through this now that I've juggled everything we did that first go around on the building, and make sure that we've got everything in that space that we talked about beforehand, and then maybe talk through that kitchen, because I think we could gain a little bit of, or lose a little bit of square footage and help us with our costs. It might also give us some other storage area near that sally port that, or delivery area, or some kind of a space. We talked, Michael and I talked about moving the IT services and stuff, 911, some of that stuff. I think it was actually 911, wasn't it, Mike?
Yeah, they wanted dispatch over here, so I'm thinking if we were to kinda
So,
shrink the kitchen, that would give us,
If we,
nice.
if we done, and the way that's brought in a van every day. So we would probably need either maybe extend this sally port a little bit, or put another doorway here where that van, as long as we've got to haul that food 20 or 30
Right.
foot up a ramp, so.
yeah.
Right now, there's a receiving dock.
Sean had a receiving dock right
Okay,
here.
okay.
So we can relocate that door, you know, if the kitchen's gonna be more this way. And we
yeah, I
can,
didn't
That
want to
way it
block
can
the
come right
sally
into the
port
kitchen and
for,
be-
obviously for the purposes it's intended, but I did want to put a receiving door in, because I knew you guys were taking in, loads of food and stuff that way, so, that might just be a little bit of a process that we need to talk about a little bit more, and then see if we could repurpose some of that square footage, and either release some of the stuff out of the Vance building, or, maybe take care of some of those things that you guys mentioned earlier from, other storage needs. But it sounds like if we could get rid of some square footage, it wouldn't hurt.
yes.
yeah. So one of the reasons we never put the jail right up against Vance, someone asked me that question, was because Vance School is built in 1910, it's still in good condition, but it's what we call an unreinforced masonry building. So what that meant, back in those days, when they built masonry, the bricks are what hold it together. There's no steel rebar vertically or horizontally in that building, because they didn't build it with reinforcement until probably upwards to the late 1970s. It wasn't really common until like the 80s. And so what that means, since we're in Illinois and we do have a seismic zone area here because of that big fault line, if we were to have a ground shake event, unreinforced masonry buildings have the tendency to want to shake and fall apart like a pile of Legos. In the code, the building code would say essential rated facilities that must be able to stand during high storm events or seismic events would be your essential functions, hospitals, police stations, sheriff's departments, and so forth. And dispatch would be considered also an essential function. So we'd like to probably get dispatch over to here. And we're thinking right now with the 30-foot distance we have, that allows that if Vance were to have a partial collapse in a seismic event or even or traumatic event, it's not necessarily gonna fall right onto the sheriff department, which is intended to be a stand-up facility. So even with the county space we had in between, we would build that in a way that could if it were to get crushed, it could get crushed, but it wouldn't take down this wall. There'd almost be like a little bit of two-wall construction there. So that way, if this were to collapse, it doesn't impact us on there. So we run into this in schools all the time when we have to design storm shelters, which are also one of those essential facilities that can't. And so we gotta be careful where those storm shelters go, that we don't have like a taller gym that's non-storm rated. Because if that gym were to collapse, we don't want it falling on top of the storm shelter. So that's why we've kind of always maintained a little bit of separation there. Having the connection still definitely works, and we can do that. We'll just design it so that way when the connection, it's not structurally dependent upon the outside of your essential facility. So that way, if something were to happen, it doesn't necessarily take down a corner of the sheriff's office. So there was that's kind of explaining a little
We
bit
do
the
that a
thought
lot.
process.
I do that a lot in hospitals. If you guys, I think, have had a major addition done to your hospital recently, you walk between the two buildings, there's usually a really wide threshold and a really thick wall, because they've usually built a second wall up against the original building. And it's kind of the sacrificial, one of those buildings is the more sacrificial building to the other.
Any other questions from the group here? I know one question was, I'm sorry if I kicked you, Russ, it's the table. Number of cells. And so in the layout with the mezzanine, so the way the mezzanine work, we have, as you guys are aware, we got the stairs that goes up to the mezzanine. So where it says day room and it says total number of beds, that's for both upper and lower in that pod, if you will. So, we would have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 56. And that was kind of,
Should be 58, actually. I think he forgot that we could build over the secure corridor. So that would actually be that'd be 8 in that one instead of 6.
Okay.
John just thought the cells stopped at the corridor, but they don't.
so that could get you to 58, and Bill Garnos, when he did the jail study, his recommendation was about 55 for your future, if I recall correctly. So we're right about that number. And because we're kind of doing this in a pod, that kind of worked out. And I know the one question that was asked is, you know, because we showed a total number that showed more beds in a count. And if you were to add in, like maybe where some of the isolation cells are, you know, those could be a temporary cell in a high incident where 4th of July weekend, you had a whole bunch of people that got arrested. You gotta be able to put them somewhere. You could use a temporary cell for a period of time until you're able to get people bonded out or whatever. So that would still give you the flexibility. And then even with classification and being able to sort someone, like if you got someone that's turning crazy inside the cell and you wanna get them out of general population and let them cool off somewhere, you got at least a holding cell to be able to do that. But it doesn't necessarily take up the holding cell that you would have for your arresting officer coming off of the Sally Port. So we said, on Garnell's, thanks Carl, so on his, so you've had some high peak times, what Carl handed in front of me, Jay, or not Jay, Sean.
Yeah,
You guys bet.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, was the last page from Garnell's report about how do we plan for inmates. And so their average ADP right now is 35 inmates, and he assigned a peak factor that gave them 8 beds, and then a classification factor, and that got them up to 48. And I think for a while we were looking, you know, can we do, so 48 is almost 50, so if we're in that 55 range, does that make sense for a little bit of extra growth? And, but we also know that's also the most expensive part of the jail construction, is the secured part. And so if we were to try and, if the county made a decision consciously, we'd really like to be closer down to that 48 number, then potentially where we're looking, that would be taking out one of these pods, that would be dropping you by 8 or 10 cells. There are some counties, like, what's the county we went to go visit?
Moultrie.
Moultrie County. They built an extra pod, but they didn't finish it. The intent was they could always come back and refinish it. And I think the one comment the sheriff said was he wished they had just, of course, it's all about money. You can't
Right.
afford to do things you can't afford to do. Looking back, he said it probably would have been a little cheaper at the time to have just finished that out, because now you're trying to build something secure inside a box.
Well, that's something we talked about on this one, is keep this design, just change these two cells to more of a dormitory. So take out the cell blocks, put, like a couple of showers in it, a couple of regular toilets, a couple of latrines with wall mounts. Make this like a 20-bed day room, 5 sets of bunk beds down each wall. Do the same thing over here, except make it a female,
Okay,
and that way
Make
we
it more of a dorm type.
dorm type, then
Yeah.
we've still got all of these to use for
mhm,
the people that we gotta control, and, we've got enough cells stuck around here that if we've got, so most of the time, all of our females could be in here together. We've got that one female, like right now, we've got cells here, if we've got one of these empty, we can just throw them on the other side,
mhm.
but that would take a lot of the,
Jeff. And Jeff, I do show, three cells in that medical area that, and you can use some, the booking area is really for booking. We don't count those beds in the cell count, but the fact of the matter is, I'll put a skylight probably in that area if you need to hold somebody in there that's just having a bad day.
right,
You can use that booking area, and we've got it, from, talking with Jay, I think we showed 2 padded cells in there, and I went ahead and showed another padded cell in the medical area
yeah,
as well, if somebody's just a suicide, danger to themselves. The booking area, sometimes they're coming in high or whatever,
right.
but the medical might be for some other purposes.
And we was
But those
talking,
are also 3 beds.
yeah, I think we could maybe shrink that medical down a little bit. Probably just the 2 regular cells, if we had to have somebody in a padded cell, they would probably be over in the main book area, and just, she would have to go over there and deal with them.
Okay, well.
I'm not sure we totally,
start having
because we could, without medical, of course, you think medical, just a doctor, but we've got psychiatric and all that stuff coming in too, so that might
Yeah.
be,
And that's why I put a padded in there.
okay,
So what I'm hearing is potentially taking maybe these 2 cell pods that are right along the eastern side of, so north and south of control, Sean, because you can't see it. They're talking about making
Right.
those 2 pods, which would be right along your future growth corridor, making those the 2 dormitory style.
and I say that make this one men, because it'll really got more men.
Mm-hmm.
But then that could also be our, like if we've got a work release person that comes and goes, it's easier to just, they can change out here. You can bring them in, if they get off a midnight shift, bring them in there and put them in their cell, and like I say, most of our females are the same way.
Okay.
I'm thinking like,
Well, that's
make this
if
for,
that's the case, Jeff. I'd actually use that secure corridor that I identify for bail bondsmen and attorneys, and make that also like a work release entry, so you're not tracking any contraband through the building.
Okay.
You could use that 8-person area on the south side of the control room would work perfect.
have this one like
I
a
think I got an
20
interview,
bed day room,
interview room
this one
there.
like a
Mhm.
16 bed female. The chances are we never have 16 in there, but stranger things have happened, so.
And I would have to look at it and size it, just tell you exactly how many beds I could put in there, because it'll be based on the open floor area, to meet the Illinois standards.
Right. And when we're talking about making those dormitory, that means we would not be doing a mezzanine above those
Right,
spaces.
it'd
They'll
just be a-
stay,
You can,
we
you
could.
can just leave them open.
Matter of fact, one of them I
Yeah.
went to, I've toured in the past, downstairs was the day room, and the mezzanine was all where they had all the bunks at.
Okay,
Yeah, because what you find is you end up still having to give them 35 square foot of unencumbered. So you start pushing 16, 20 people in one of those, and we gotta be real careful about, obviously, you got 1 for 12 on showers. So if we go over 16, we're going over 12, we have 13 people in there, we're gonna put a second shower, and that usually
Right.
means another toilet or two. So I'll have to do a little bit of work on that, but
I'm thinking maybe
I don't
just
have a
going with
problem with that.
porcelain
You got a lot of
hardware in there
lockdown
instead of all the
cells.
stainless steel.
What, say we have it 58 beds, 55, and then 20 years from now, we find out that's not enough, we need another 20 bunk cells. Where are you gonna add that to that?
so that's,
Is there room?
That's the future growth.
we're not necessarily gonna be able to go out
You're
this
not,
way.
that's not an option then, right?
Right, because we're
Okay.
getting close to the edge of that
All right.
site. You look at the site plan.
Yeah, kind of like this corridor here is.
Yeah, so that's actually, that's what this future growth corridor is that's already constructed, and then we can add in that next pod, if you will,
At this area?
at this
Oh,
area.
okay,
Just
all right.
south.
Going to the
That
south.
was,
Now, the sacrifice that is now you're getting into your parking lot, but at that point in time, maybe you look at, okay, parking maybe is easier to solve by, maybe you purchase some property across the street, but you still have room on your site to grow your jail facility if you had to.
yeah.
And by kind of planning, I like the way Sean did that, because he knows that's gonna be a hallway connection. And it's gonna be, most likely, it's not because the sheriff department offices grew, it's because the housing area grew. And so being able to have that now as a connection, and here's my next
Okay,
section of pod,
makes sense.
I can do
It
that.
also gives me a visual connection from the control room to wherever the other control station would obviously be within view on that corridor. I don't like having any of my control stations where if power went out, God forbid we have no diesel fuel in the world to run a diesel generator and we just run out of power in all ways. I want guys to be able to at least visually see each other if we're gonna escort somebody down a hallway or whatever. I
I'm
want the
guessing
two
we just take
control
our
rooms to be
generator
able to look at each
and
other.
do, right?
If it's sized for, it has the right capacity to
It's
handle.
size to run,
Yeah, it's very large,
Okay.
but it's 25
it's
years old.
25 years old now too, so.
Yeah, so I think, well, we might, on the generator, sometimes we have the generator mechanic come out and look at it.
But it's been maintained well.
If it's been well maintained, there might be some parts we need to replace out, but maybe the bulk of it's able to be reused. That's something we can definitely look at when we get to that stage.
Cat engines,
I know those were some of the big topics with, kitchen, the number of cells, and so making this into dormitory. We still have that square footage, but we're changing out the build out of that square footage. So I think we'll see some of that price drop, but it's not like we just lopped off a
Right,
chunk.
but by doing the dorm style, you're actually increasing the number of inmates.
That's
So
true.
that's a big plus right there,
Yeah,
if you
and
can
just like
utilize
right now,
it.
you can walk into our jail and if it was designed different, we've got, probably half of the guys could be put in a dorm style
Mhm.
setting.
Mhm. Well, that makes a lot of sense, because without really expanding the jail facility, you're increasing the capacity
And it's
quite a
a,
bit.
it's a bargaining thing with inmates too, You don't like being in here, you
Michael,
behave, you can go into a
The other thing that
dorm style setting.
I mentioned to Jeff, and you might show those guys, on the mezzanine plan, in those corners, we have open corners on the lower level. And that's, we need to bring in domestic water, fire water, some of those kind of, when I say fire water, guys.
They
I
don't
mean
need fire
sprinkler.
water, that's what gets them in there.
Sometimes I say that and everyone's like, what are you doing, John? But we'll have, those corners will be used for some utility stuff, but up above, it's not. And so I can actually grow the 4 corner cells up on each, the 4 2-day rooms and those 4 upper corners. they can actually be 4-person cells. That's another way to gain some beds in your facility without having to grow the facility. They can become 4-person cells instead of 2-person cells. And I just actually kind of fill in the corner a little bit more.
And we're
We're
not
giving the
designing this
extra-
to hold any outside people, but on down the road someday, it may be beneficial to us to hold 4 or 8 people for ICE or, DOC or somebody like that. I don't, see, that's not a plan, but that would give us an option if we could move people out of some of the cells into here and we get paid to house them for whoever we house them for.
Do you have
Well, we
any,
can put together a mezzanine plan pretty quickly. I just, at the time, I just wanted to make sure a footprint
Right.
works, but I can get you some mezzanine plans, kind of show you how we can grow those, at least those 4 in the corners to become 4-person cells, and so you gain 8 beds right there that you wouldn't necessarily have, you don't have to outfit it that way, but if you need to add beds in the future, there's 8 beds that you can add almost immediately with little or no cost.
And then pods also, Sean, would, like one of them cells in every pod be like a handicap, considered a handicap, or would you just?
Yeah,
Yeah, you can,
typically I have one in every one of the
Well, I know,
day
at
rooms.
Terre Haute, that's what, they got
Be
one
handicapped
handicap thing on the
accessible.
ground level in every pod.
Terry, do you have
And
any
it's just,
concerns right now? Just
Um,
your initial thoughts? I know they wanna maybe meet with you at some point, but
Yeah,
just.
probably do that, and then, I don't know, me and Mike will probably chit chat a little bit, and,
you can
I
take
don't know,
this
just-
full size with you
yeah,
too.
which, is this the updated one? that-
Yes.
that
Yes,
brought me?
yeah, this is updated more so than the one I already did.
And do you have the actual, like, dimension, size dimension on all these and everything? And then,
we can certainly do that.
just kinda start
Right,
hashing
right
stuff out in my
now,
head
we're in a
and whatnot.
study, we've been hired for a study, so I haven't gone through and dimensioned plans and stuff. This is kind of like a really, really nice book plan, as I call them. So we can get you some dimensional information if need be, we just haven't gone to that
Or
extent.
grow 20-foot pinhole.
I guess I would ask, and it's not a big deal, why is the police department on this side, not this side, with the,
We've asked that
since the
too.
jail is here,
Right,
and you know what I'm saying?
You're saying,
yeah.
Why
why
wouldn't,
you not
why,
more an open corner than being surrounded by?
right.
Part of the reason we
And
did
the
that,
Judge chamber here, and the courtroom here, and there's a corridor, take inmates straight through this way.
so with the connection, since we're gonna be, continue to maintain a connection between the county government building over here at Vance and here, we thought it made sense that would be a sheriff's office. And so that way, if the sheriff, especially because once upon a time in the middle, we had that, the conference meeting room and everything. So that's why we had that being located here. We could look at flipping it. You still got the ability to walk through this way, through the sheriff's space, however you guys change or agree to have that vestibule so that if you wanted to get over to here, get over to the court area, you can do that.
Yeah.
So, because I think we'll want to make sure, because this is the court hearing room, that we have the ability that your staff can get over to there and not necessarily have to go outside.
How soundproof will the walls be? Because the jail now is noisy, right?
Right.
You hear everybody yelling,
Yeah.
screaming,
So
cussing, whatever.
these are all gonna be concrete block walls, so we're gonna make those, one, they're gonna be very structurally robust, but we're gonna try and cut down that sound, because you don't wanna have your officers listening, whether they're sheriff department officers or police department officers, listening to someone having a bad day.
Well, whereas I'd be worried about that, more so the interview, when
Mhm.
we interview people daily, we can't have our recorded interviews going to the state's attorney's office or being played in court with a bunch of, hey, suck my blah, blah, blah,
Mhm.
coming from
Right.
the inmates that are right next door to us, because
Yeah.
we're on this side. I mean, we arrest a lot of people, so.
Yeah, and
We want
that's,
the interview room, if we're staying on this side, we
Right.
have to be over here, farthest away from all these
Okay.
inmates.
all right, and with this even being a corridor too, but yeah, we'll make sure that we have that sound connection, because this wall here, would be a wall that goes up. So a lot of times acoustics get bad in rooms because the sound actually comes up through the acoustical tile
Yeah.
and gets in that space between the tile and the underside of the structure, and it bounces, and then that's why you can hear people talk in their office. It's not because you're hearing them through the wall, the sound's actually coming up and over.
Yeah.
So this wall would come all the way up to the underside of the structural deck, one for fire separation, but also two, it cuts down on a lot of that acoustical transfer. And so when we design things as architects, we design not just for structure, but a lot of times we look for sound, STC, sound transmission coefficient, to make sure we're not allowing sound to pass through or above things.
Good,
So we
good.
would definitely wanna make sure, in my opinion, anything going around the perimeter of the police department or the sheriff's department, we want that to be a sound barrier, as, you know, no one needs to listen to what happens on there on a regular basis.
Yeah, that'd be great. And
I've
yeah,
been doing this since 1995, and I've had every issue with sound attenuation as there is. I know judges hate bouncy rooms, for lack of better terms, you know, echoey rooms. I've got a number of products that we use that are very good for making interview rooms, first appearance video, and some of those places very acoustically quality rooms. So I know how to do that stuff. I've been detailing it for a long time.
Yep. So yeah, that's really important.
Other-
in an interview. So
Yet doors are just about as bad as walls, and we would probably want to get an insulated door for those spaces just to stop some of the sound drifting in through all the hallways. I think if I remember right, and Michael, I don't have a plan in front of me, we do kind of isolate our interview rooms a little ways away from the housing.
Yes. When you look at it, and when you see like the yellow box right next to it, you think, oh, that's the housing area, but, you know, we do have a corridor and some other spaces in between.
Sure, there'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4 walls where you've got to the police department there.
Yeah.
Well, unless you're talking about the Saturday interview over here.
And then you do have the one
That's right,
interview.
since I do that.
But you'd have
There
a wall
as
here,
well,
a
but
wall
I
here,
think
somewhat a
we'll,
wall there.
it's easier for me to see if like I have room entries, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I understand.
visual. It's just-
I think one of the spirit
Yeah, I
houses
see what
right
you're-
here.
Yeah, it looks
So it goes
good.
up to-
And actually, this wall here that's at the jail wall, this is
That's
gonna
just
be
like
a
the-
precast concrete.
The court there would be just
And
for
so that's actually
arraignments and
insulated
Yeah, like-
precast
like on Monday
concrete,
morning
so
when
it's
we have
gonna
our-
be
stuff. Do lawyers do that?
probably 10 inches thick with at least
So how does a lawyer
2
supposed
inches
to
of
get
rigid
the-
foam in the middle for
Here,
insulation, so I
walk
know
through
that's
here.
definitely gonna sound
Oh, yeah.
dead.
Well,
Yeah, that's
Coming
good.
across
most of
that,
these will never have
because
a
this is
lawyer.
gonna
That's
be
what-
that
that's what-
two-story
Yeah, that's,
portion
all they do is we
of the
bring
jail,
them,
so I know
we'll
that's
bring 'em out
gonna
of here,
kill
like,
a lot of
say
sound.
people brought in
coming
on
off
the
of
weekend,
here.
will either be maybe kept in
And,
here.
but you know, you can still have someone here coming in,
So
that
this
you
court
might be
meeting,
interviewing, that
lawyers
could be,
will go to this.
you know,
Right, so
scream some obscenities,
have-
and you don't
The
necessarily
judge will
want
be
that
there
to
at 10
show up
o'clock, have so
on
and
your
so, so
tape
and
in your
so, so
interview
here,
room
so
in
you
your
yank
blue
them
area,
out.
so we'll
Right in
have to
there,
make sure
judge
design
says,
for that.
no bond, no
Hey,
bond,
Michael,
you know,
Yes,
OR, whatever.
I didn't know if you had to back in your
we
sleeve.
will also, at some point in time, we move forward with this project. You know, we have the VR capabilities, so, you know, we can have the chief and the sheriff, we can actually put the goggles on them and actually have them walk through the space,
mhm,
and get an idea of what that feels like and the layout of those spaces.
yeah. If we move further on into design, both Klinger and HMN, we got the VR goggles, virtual reality, so we can take that, and then we find that's helpful because there's times where you and your staff wanna do a virtual walkthrough of the building, and sometimes you can point out, oh, how do we want things arranged as you're like walking through it, because not everyone can look at the plan and be able to visualize that, and we understand that.
That's pretty good. Okay.
It's very helpful.
Jay mentioned that he wanted to change where we have his office
Jail
listed, and
was-
we wanna be back, he wanted to be back in the jail there somewhere,
Okay,
And
so.
actually, that'd be probably the secretary, you're talking, that'd be the
Yeah.
secretary,
Mhm.
sheriff's
So
secretary,
working, so, you
and
know,
have him somewhere.
we might move him back up in
The kitchen, that's his office.
here somewhere like that.
Yeah, he went back in the jail area, that's the only other thing I can think of that we talked about, but
okay.
And maybe, maybe move some of this mechanical or something.
Well, if the kitchen's gonna change down, you don't necessarily need like a food service director kitchen.
Right.
Maybe that's where
Make him an office.
jail admin, and we might shift that around, but I know there's at least an office space here, we might reconfigure some things, but we can definitely look at relocating it and making that a little bit bigger for him too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some square footage there, and actually have kind of a commission, room for the commissioners, over there, and, you know, there's several things that we're cutting out that maybe we can find ways of repurposing. And like you said, that kitchen area might make a good place to get Jay's office.
Anybody else have anything that we forgot?
Michael?
Michael? Nothing right now.
Have you got a key for Green School?
Mm-hmm. I would say,
Well, you know, thanks very much, Chief, it was nice to meet
First,
you.
open the door here, and then there's, no, I'm just
Mr.
saying.
Martin,
no,
it's
I'm
nice
saying,
to meet
no,
you as well.
Here's, and you got three way to get hold of it.
Okay.
There's no thing to stop me.
Well, see, that's what, originally when they had this all, that's kind of what this area was in here. Yeah, we're gonna do something a little bit different. to give them a-
Something, I assume you wanted something to keep people.
Well, and that's why
wandering
when
through.
they will put, maybe that area.
Okay, well, we appreciate everyone taking the time to come here and meet. And you know, the one thing we always tell people that when you see that drawing, it's not like it's set in stone, it's still, we're still at a very preliminary
We need
stage
some type of foyer.
to be able to
My
move things around here a bit too. So we'll,
secretary there.
because we'll put that connection back into here, and that'll kind of change what your corner's gonna look like down here, Sheriff. Now, if you guys wanna think about it, do you still wanna have a shared entrance? We can arrange something that way, but if you wanna have your own separate ones, I think that's, it's kinda up to how you guys wanna be able to, I wanna say like your roommates now potentially, but, you know, you might wanna have the door to get to your own room that
We have
way.
a sign that says enter that way, point to the sheriff's department.
Thank you, okay, we were on the same page.
Well,
Yeah.
something I was thinking
I'm
of,
involved in police work, so I
you
don't
know,
know,
maybe, you know, like right now, you've got
It'd be easier.
the police department here, entrance, sheriff's department here. If we do, ultimately, if you guys come into this building, we're gonna have combined dispatch in all likelihood.
Right.
So, maybe in the daytime, you'll have someone here to, when you people come in, to take care of them, but the rest of the day, you know, nighttime, midnight shift, you're not gonna have anybody in here. So that kinda makes sense, maybe to have it one
A
entrance,
common foyer.
Yeah.
yeah, for
On one side,
people to
yeah.
come in, and then if the police department shut down, then someone at the sheriff's department, which we would.
Dispatch will be doing the door buzzer, right, or
Probably,
more likely?
yeah.
Likely. I mean, when you walk in the
Yeah, there's
PS,
central
yeah.
control can control the perimeter
So
doors.
you'd have a window over here for the sheriff's department to take care of things, you'd have a window over here for the police department during the daylight hours. I mean, your what's her name's, handle her stuff through the window, Melissa,
Well, I mean,
and mine the same
unless
way.
she goes to central dispatch, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, but Melissa will go to dispatcher, won't she?
You might not be anybody down there.
Still have them.
Just, you know, depending on how it all shakes out.
I mean, have you talked about this central dispatch, and is it still going over in the Vance building, or are you working
We're
on
gonna be
putting it
bringing
in here?
dispatch over to here.
Okay.
That's where it's
Yeah,
gonna be.
it'll be in the same.
inside.
Because
It'll have
because
to
we
be.
have to go to dispatch the paperwork that comes through the police computer and vice versa, so either that or we're going to.
Yeah, I think he'd be the
Vacuum
same way.
system
I
in
mean,
like the
I
bank
think
does.
he's gonna wanna
Send them
work
through.
with
And even with
dispatch
the-
too.
We always intended that there would be some good signage on the outside that Paris Police Department, Edgar County Sheriff Department, and even with the shared entrance, you still want clear signage so you realize when I come through this one entrance, which side is which. And even more so, like with the government center, we want people to pull up to that parking lot. You know, whether I'm here to pay my tax assessment, go see the sheriff, or go see the police department, it's really clear which door they're gonna wanna go to do that. Even with the shared police and sheriff door, cause you don't want people coming in, they're like, I need to pay my tax assessment, no, you need to go down and over that way. So, we'll work on some clarity for that.
Yeah, before you get too far along with that, I think you should talk to Terry and make
Yes.
sure we have all the square footage that he would see
Right.
appropriate.
Yeah, so our
I
next
mean, I
step
know we got
is,
some things over in another building that maybe you guys weren't
Well, I
aware
feel,
of
Terry,
or
I
something
kinda-
like that, so.
We got to maybe see some of this switched and, or your, got your little niche here, and then we've got, and that way, this is, instead of having to walk around.
You know, when we met last week, we talked about, we thought maybe it might be better to flip flop it a little bit or some, but, you know,
I think so. And we can get together and hash that
Yeah,
out.
we can discuss that. Yeah, we can have a meeting.
I can kind of see in some respects, you guys want to be able to have more, because obviously at that first appearance hearing, the officer needs to be present for that, especially if you're the ones arresting him. And how do we make sure we can get you to that first appearance courtroom?
Yeah, I mean, usually they take them to jail and they won't have to go back to court
Yeah,
for
most of our first appearance, everybody will come right out of the jail into the,
Yeah,
so, you know, you don't even have to have an officer there.
oh, that's a good point.
right.
They'll get a subpoena for a couple weeks later.
Yeah, when they have a preliminary hearing or something, that'll be
Okay.
a few weeks on down the road.
So, well, I'll say the next step is, I got your email now. Let's see if we can maybe get in touch and do like a video conference interview
Yeah.
next week.
All right.
And then we can kind of go through the programming we've got to do with these guys. We can do that with you guys and kind of come up with, you know, what your spatial needs are, you know, both for your present and then also we want to be able to account for your future because we want this to be a long-term partnership here. And then we can really start to move stuff around once we get a better idea of what your needs are. And so we'll probably I would say within the next month or so, we're gonna see this plan changing some more, not just for maybe the relocation of your group within the building, but also, you know, to accommodate things specific to you, and then how we connect together here with Vance, so. And then I think we still kinda know where we gotta be at for budget wise, so we'll try and make sure we're squeezing things through as we can to be able to, obviously we can't do a project, we can't come in on budget.
Did you guys get did Jeff give you the sheet on the costs?
He did.
Did he? Okay, I thought he did, but I
Give one to
wasn't
me
sure.
and one to the mayor, I think, so we can do that.
Copies of it, I thought
So
he did.
we're in the process, I would say, look at that as we're no longer doing that option, cause we know we gotta go a bit more or less, and then a lot of these numbers are starting to change as we're moving pieces around, so, look at that as we're not going up any higher than that number, we're gonna try and work our way down and do that in a way where we can get this coming together.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you. Thanks, Sean.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Mark.
Do you have to say anything for the meeting, are you guys to do the board? Or just
Meeting adjourned.
It doesn't matter if you're-
Yeah,
I forgot we did it. Yeah.
that's right, with Augie not sitting here, I forget that the camera's running.